Hi, this is Kim, the Maker Mom, and I'm here today with Dr. Jim Arbogast from GOJO Industries. GOJO Industries is the leading global provider and marketer of skin health and hygiene solutions for away-from-home settings. You may know them as the maker of Purell hand sanitizer. Today I'm here talking with Dr. Jim, and he's going to tell us a little bit about his career in STEM and his role with GOJO. Good afternoon.
Hi, Kim. How are you?
Great. I'm eager to get started. Let's just talk a little bit first about what you do and what brought you to where you are today. So, what do you do as a GOJO scientist?
Well, that's a great question, and no 2 days are the same. At GOJO, as a scientist, I should start at a high level. What we focus on is advancing the science of hand hygiene. So we make, as you mentioned, Purell as a hand sanitizer and many different types of hand washes and hand wipes. And you'd be surprised how many unanswered research questions there are out there about hand hygiene, especially as we create new solutions. So we're designing studies, we're executing studies. In some cases, I'm a principal investigator in those studies. In some cases, I'm a co-investigator, part of a team. In other cases, I may be a reviewer. We do a lot of collaboration, both internally and externally. We have teams that work together to bring a variety of different disciplines, the science, the technology, the engineering, the math, all of that comes together on teams with different disciplines I can talk more about later. And then we also collaborate with external research teams, maybe colleagues in academia or industry that we're partnering with.
So what did you study in college, and did you expect to land a role in skincare science, or what brought you to that?
Okay, I'll tell you a little bit about that. I definitely did not expect to land in skincare science. I had no idea what skincare science was, probably like most high school and even college students. You don't really think about that. It's not a typical major. I always had a little bit of an affinity towards chemistry. So for whatever reason, chemistry came relatively easily for me. I went to Carleton College, which is a small school in Minnesota, and majored in chemistry. So that's a liberal arts college. Have a Bachelor of Arts in Chemistry. And then I really didn't know what I wanted to do after that. I wasn't really ready to work. So I decided to go to graduate school. I went to UCLA. I was sick of the cold weather in Minnesota, decided to get some warm weather, went out to UCLA, and I got a PhD in organic chemistry. I went in thinking that I would probably become a professor. And what I realized is a couple things. Number one, I didn't want to, at that time, I didn't want to continue with more academics and postdoc, which would be the normal path towards a professor at that time. And I really wanted to be more applied. So I kind of got lucky. Clorox, who makes Clorox bleach and other products, they interviewed on campus and I got a job, which is a great way to apply the science.
So that's interesting. Some people after college, if they don't know what they want to do, they travel. And you chose to get a PhD in organic chemistry. That's impressive.
Yeah. Yeah, in the summer I might have traveled a little bit, but I figured a PhD, and even if I decided to stop at a master's, it couldn't hurt me, So even though I didn't know exactly what to do, what I was going to do, I figured I'd be able to get benefit from it.
Sure. So how you started out with a different company. How did you wind up at Purell, and what kind of job do you do now there?
Well, I went to Clorox and got into product development straight out of graduate school. I learned a lot there, and then but I couldn't afford a house. They're in the Bay Area of California, and I just decided that I wanted to get to an area of the country where I could get a little more bang for my buck. Sorry for the personal side, but I went to a company called Dial. You've probably heard of Dial soap. And I found my way into Dial product development, and that's what I got when I got into skin science. I came to GOJO when they found me somehow, and I started to do some work in skin science. And I was really attracted to GOJO because we are all about advancing the science around hand hygiene and really trying to apply that towards public health benefits. And it may sound extreme, but our purpose statement is saving lives and making life better through well-being solutions. In hospital and healthcare settings, hand hygiene really does that. So I think it's exciting that we get to apply the science that way.
Sure, I can see even in my own home, especially as we approach cold and flu season, how hand hygiene is pretty key in keeping everybody healthy here too.
Yeah, for sure. It applies in all walks and all areas of life.
Yeah, yeah. So tell me a little bit about, you mentioned you're involved in all sorts of studies and different roles. Thinking about young people, how might somebody be involved in STEM and play a role in some research, not necessarily doing the research, but what are some of the roles involved with that?
Well, we work with students at college level and graduate school level, either through through colleges of public health, or sometimes we partner with chemistry or particular labs. We have students themselves may be able to get involved through internships, collaborations. We most of the time are interacting with students on particular projects. So we may be working with a research advisor that that is studying a particular area, and we want to collaborate with them. So I would, one piece of advice I would give students, if they have a particular area of interest or they know they want to do applied work like consumer products or industry, try to go work with a professor that has that experience. The odds will go up that they'll get that experience if the professor is applying their research that way. Does that make sense, Kim?
Yeah, that does. And, even with looking at like your chemistry PhD, for instance, it sounds like there's a lot of work you're doing beyond the research in terms of advocating in the public realm and speaking about hand hygiene and things like that. So it's just interesting to see where a STEM degree can take a person. Tell me a little bit about, back to the day-to-day, what is an unexpected joy of your job or the world of skincare science and hand hygiene?
Well, we get to, like I said, we get to advance the science. So I think one joy I have is that we're doing really great foundational work, and we get to publish our results in peer-reviewed literature and work with the world's best, literally the world's best in infection prevention. And we have some of the best scientists in the world at GOJO and in the area of hand hygiene and microbiology, skin science, and then we're working with the world's best. So I love that. And I love how my role and what I get to work on, what other scientists at GOJO get to work on. It started with product development, which is really cool. The ingredients that go into every product, they're on the back label. Most people don't look at the back label, but there's a lot of chemistry and biology and microbiology that gets applied to that. And now, as you mentioned, Kim, my role has evolved to working on public health advancements. So we're trying to tie the hygiene science to public health needs. And sometimes that means working with the regulatory bodies of the world, FDA, et cetera, or public health organizations. Like just last Wednesday and Thursday, I was at the CDC in Atlanta talking with some of their scientists.
Neat. Well, I know I think you're talking even on a broader scale, but I know when we're out and about, say in an airport, and I see one of those Purell stands, I always take the opportunity to clean off while I'm on the go.
Yeah, I think, that's important. And one thing I tell people is you especially want to do that at your moments of need or your moments of risk. So right before eating, if I could have people just do one thing right before they eat, if they can make sure they have clean hands, that would reduce your risk of getting sick dramatically.
Yeah, well, I noticed we were on a cruise recently, and every dining room had Purell stands out front, so you had to clean before you went in, and I like that. I was very worried about getting sick on our cruise.
Yeah,
So
they
tell me,
do that. Just a quick aside, because we've presented to the cruise line headquarters and their safety people. We have publications around how the products work against particular organisms, like norovirus is a big concern for the cruise line industry. So they're looking at the science and trying to do the best they can in terms of the choice they make, the product they make. So we're trying to prove that our product really works, it delivers on the claims, and delivers the benefits. And then also they're looking at what works in public health. So cleaning your hands before you eat is going to reduce the rate of infections.
sure, sure. Oh, yeah. So I had a question here about demonstrating the importance of hand hygiene. That's obviously a big, excuse me, a big part of what you do. Um, I think this is an interesting, when you talk about saving lives through hand hygiene and improving lives, that in particular, that kind of message seems to be really attractive to girls who are considering STEM careers. And so it's nice to hear about, like, here's how you can use chemistry to save lives.
Right.
I think that's a nice message here. I have a note about something exciting with the White House. You want to tell me about that?
Yeah, sure. So there is a growing public health issue around antibiotic resistance. So this is when microorganisms, in particular bacteria, become resistant to antibiotics. So many of you probably, Kim, and many of your listeners have probably heard of MRSA. It's an acronym that stands for methicillin-resistant Staph aureus. That's a type of bacteria that became resistant to this antibiotic, methicillin. So anyway, when these organisms become resistant, just like the name would indicate, they're harder to deal with, harder to kill. Antibiotics may not work anymore on those. We do know that a fundamental way to reduce the need for antibiotics is to prevent infection. That's where hand hygiene comes in. Good hand hygiene can prevent infections. If you don't need antibiotics, you have a reduced risk of getting antibiotic-resistant organisms. So back to the White House. Sorry for that long preamble. President Obama issued an executive order September of 2014 that the country needed to combat antibiotic-resistant organisms, antibiotic-resistant bacteria. And the World Health Organization has been working on this for years. Earlier this year, then, the CDC contacted us and invited us to a big event at the White House on June 2nd. We were invited amongst 150 other organizations. And it was exciting. I wasn't there personally. I wish I was, but we could only send one person, and our owner, Joe Camphor, went to represent GOJO. So that was really an exciting thing, and really it's a great example of how important what our science can do, how important our science is and what it can do in some of these really very real life-saving, life-threatening kind of situations.
Nice, nice. So it seems like even though this was an area you hadn't heard of when you were younger, it's provided a really fulfilling and interesting career for you. So I'm wondering if you have some advice for young people who might open their eyes to a career in skincare, health, and hand hygiene, and working at a company like GOJO.
Yeah, for sure, I can give some general advice. I think, I didn't realize it at the time, but I ended up in a place and in a situation as a scientist, kind of doing the things that I'm interested in and enjoy. I've always been a little bit of a clean guy. I've always had an interest in helping other people, and I get to do that through this public health thing. And I like working on the science and publishing the results. So if I had it to do over again, I might have realized that earlier if I had thought a little bit harder about it. So I would say to kids that are listening now, or people that you interact with, and what I tell them is to think about where their passion is, what are their interests, what are their strengths, and then start to investigate that. So if they like applied science, working with consumer product companies like GOJO is a great place where you can apply science and it gets right out to the real world. I remember one of my biggest first thrills was seeing a bottle of Clorox on the grocery store and Walmart and Target shelves and saying, I developed that formula in this new product. So they should think about that, talk to other scientists, talk to professors. It was one of my undergrad professors that opened my thoughts to graduate school. I went into college having no idea about graduate school. I was just a kid growing up in Minnesota, no idea how that worked. I didn't come from a science family, heavy science family, so talking to professors can help. And then I do remember at one point in time, my dad connected me to a scientist who had started his own company, and that was when I was in graduate school. That opened my thoughts to connecting science with business.
Nice. Okay. Well, thank you. Those are some good tips. This was very insightful. I learned a lot about what happens behind the scene. And actually, one question that you prompted with your last statement, you talked about the pride of seeing your product on the shelf and how exciting that was. What is the typical product development lifespan? Like, how long does it take from having this exciting hypothesis and seeing it on the shelf?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it varies a lot. So I'm not going to try to avoid that question, but I would say the absolute shortest that you can go from the concept or the research question to a product on the market is about 9 to 12 months. And that's assuming a whole lot of success and everything comes together.
Yeah.
A more common timeline, especially with the areas we're working in, which is, it may sound simple, but there's a lot of complex science, microbiology, skin biology, chemistry. We've got to make sure our products are stable. And our products that make an antibacterial claim are drugs, so they have to be stable for 3 years. We do usually 6 months of accelerated high temperature testing. So a more typical timeline for a Purell product would be about 2 to 5 years, depending on how complex and how new the formulation and the product is.
Okay, yeah, the 2 to 5 years sounded, I guess I was expecting something like that as opposed to 9 to 12 months. That would mean a lot of, I don't want to say luck, but that things go well, best case scenario.
Right, it's best case scenarios, or there may be relatively simple new products. So if you have lemon fragranced bleach, something like that, or lemon fragranced whatever, that's a relatively small change that can be done faster. It's a new formula, but you're really only probably working the hardest on the fragrance. I think the one thing I do want to mention, your question prompted, Kim, is for me, I like that time frame. It's long. It can be viewed as long, but it's not too long. I know I've thought about working in pharmaceuticals and the drug development pipeline, and for me, that's even more complex, and that usually takes about 10 to 20 years when you're working on a new antibiotic or a new drug. And I wanted to just be working at a little bit faster pace, but that's something that everyone will have a different point of view on that, and they should kind of follow what their interests are.
Sure. Well, thank you again. This was really interesting, and I hope it provides some insights to the people who watch or listen to this. And thanks for all you're doing too for hand hygiene and for making us a healthier world. I appreciate that.
You're welcome. It was great talking to you, Kim. Thank you.
All right. Take care.
All right. You too. Bye-bye.